What's up everyone, Games Apprentice back with another Evercade review, and this week we're looking at the Piko Collection 4. Piko's back, baby! The Piko Collections are always interesting. The first one was probably the best Evercade cart, and one that won't be eclipsed because they put so much effort into it, and then I think people realise that they don't need to put that much effort into a cart. However, the other ones haven't lived up to it, but they always offer some variety and plenty of games I haven't heard of, so I'm excited to try this one just like the others. I've only heard of a couple on this one, so let's jump in. Here they are ranked from worst to best. The coveted honour of worst game on this collection goes to Target Renegade, an 8-bit beat 'em up with pretty cool music. You punch and kick multiple copies of the same one enemy. I think you might be the bad guy in this game, as enemies don't seem to want to have anything to do with you. They'll mostly just be dancing around the screen, making them annoying to hit. Probably just innocent people running for their lives. Sometimes they walk and sometimes they'll be on bikes, which are as annoying as they are in every single beat 'em up. The other end, which is every single beat 'em up. Eventually, you'll get to a ridiculously sized level boss. For the most part, it's pretty much just a standard blueprint of every beat 'em up ever made, but just lacks much character, humour, or anything that makes it stand out. It's so rare that a game reviews itself in its own title. And to be fair, the review is probably a little on the harsh side, just simply, Not Good Street Brawler would have been fine. In Not Good Street Brawler, you play Flat Top Gary, an ex-acrobat who found out the circus that he worked for was a front for a money-laundering drug baron ringmaster, Victor von Strudel. After trying to leave the circus, Gary walks down the street and is attacked by little strongmen, knife throwers, gorillas, and circus dogs. It doesn't say any of this anywhere, but why not? That seems as good a story as any, to explain what the hell's going on. You have 2 different attacks per level, and fight 2 enemies at the same time in this very repetitive brawler. It's colourful and has a soundtrack that really epitomises the NES, but you're probably not going to want to play it for too long on a system that has much better brawlers, even if it doesn't on this particular cart. At number 7 on this list is Star X, an old school shooter with an early 3D art style. This is one of those shooters where you kind of just zone out. It's another genre that massively benefited from the invention of dual analog sticks, and it's really evident in this game. Movement and aiming are all done with the same controls, meaning that you end up spending most of the game at the top of the screen, and it's pretty much impossible to try dodge whilst trying to aim. Basically, pick one or the other. Sound effects are a bit on the loud side that you can barely hear the music, and the early 3D design is just plain ugly. It's hard to believe there was a time when graphics like these were considered great and revolutionary. They are gone forever, thank goodness. So just to put things in perspective here, I played this cart like 3 months ago and I'm just finally getting around to making the video for the review. And I remember absolutely, hating this game. And I've put it at number 6, so that probably tells you how bad the other ones are. Anyway, up next we have a puzzle platformer from the Game Boy era. In the fidgets you control 2 mice and need to work together to get to the end of the level before the time runs out. One's skinny so can jump a bit further, and the other has all the benefits that you expect from a short, fat mouse. There's not really many positives to say about it, it's just less offensive to my eyes and ears than the previous games on this list. Of all the games on this list, this was the one that I wanted to go back and play more of. Not because it's particularly good, but because it's just a bit weird. You've a sword to attack people with, and you also throw out crappy red projectile too. On paper it looks like just a below par action platformer. It doesn't look great considering it was a SNES game, and the controls are far from tight, with terrible jumping, and for the most part, it's a fairly forgettable experience. But where it gets interesting, note how I said interesting and not good, is with the pirate Bubblegum abilities. Throughout the game, fruit is hidden away. When you find that fruit, depending on what it is, gives you a different Bubblegum ability. The first one I came across was blowing a bubble to float. it felt a bit out of place in this game, but I feel like I've seen similar mechanics in other games, so I didn't think too much of it. But that's when things get really weird. Two of the other Bubblegum mechanics involve you blowing a giant bubble that consumes you, one allowing you to then bounce around the screen crushing enemies, and the other just allowing you to fly all over the screen. It was an amusing mechanic that felt so out of place for this pirate game. You really have to get your kicks where you can with this cart. The original Zero Tolerance was reviewed back on the Piko Collection 3 about a year ago. I enjoyed it, mainly because of the lack of FPS games on the Evercade, made it stand out as something different. Zero Tolerance Underground is basically an unreleased expansion to that game, but not one I found enjoyable in the slightest. Being an expansion, I assume this review was just going to be play it if you haven't played the original or if you just want more. But the expansion just really puts all the flaws from the original game under a magnifying glass. The main issue is just the controls, and while they're the same as the first game, it didn't seem to matter so much on that one, as you didn't need to master them. However, Underground ramps up the difficulty. You don't seem to have as much ammo, and it's just really hard not to waste what you do have. Being an add-on, I guess it would have expected you to have mastered the original before playing this, but if you haven't, and you're just playing this one straight off the bat, you're going to die a lot. Find it frustrating rather than fun, and most likely be unwilling to get better and just give up. This is probably the first mildly enjoyable game on the list. It's an action platformer where you throw stuff at skeletons, I don't know, birds, wasps or something. Eventually get into a gate that requires a quick game of Simon Says to open. The controls feel pretty tight even if the camera is a little on the zoomed in side. I'm not a big fan of the art style or the music, but I did enjoy the speed at which you're throwing projectiles, although it's quite annoying not being able to throw them in mid-air, meaning if anything rushes you while you're in mid-air that wasn't on the screen when you first jump, it'll just knock you to your death. Mildly enjoyable. It's always cool to see a slightly new mechanic in the match 3 genre. Well, not cool, but, you know, something. As well as rocking a catchy tune, Mermaids of Atlantis is a pretty fun colour matching game. What makes this one unique is the bubble mechanic. Any gaps get filled with blank bubbles, and the only way to get rid of them is to remove the colour bubbles from the bottom of it. It's challenging, and if you're used to things like Puzzle Fighter, it'll take a few goes to get your head around the bubble mechanic. It's definitely one of the better games on this list. Man, this cat sucks. The fact that I've got Glover at number 2 on this list tells me I'm probably not scoring this cart very high. As I said, it's been a while since I've read over these notes. The number 2 spot on the list goes to Glover. I want to say a hidden PS1 gem, but gem is a bit of a stretch for a game that was widely considered mediocre at best, so it fits in well on this cart in that respect. The main reason Glover is so high on the list is not because it's a good game, not at all, but because it's just something a bit different, and also because of the general quality, or lack thereof, of everything else on this cart. Glover is a 3D puzzle platformer that heavily leans into its Glover mechanics. You can walk around as a glove, you can point to where your ball is as a glove, and you can manipulate the ball by pushing it, walking on it, and hitting it, all in lovely glove-style animations. You've also got magic abilities which allow you to change what sort of ball it is. For instance, change it to something big and heavy like a bowling ball, or something like a small golf ball. These help you solve various puzzles. On paper, it sounds like it could make some interesting puzzle mechanics, and it does, but it's just incredibly frustrating to play. Like a lot of 3D PS1 games, the camera's annoying, getting the ball to go where you want it to go is annoying, walking on the ball and getting yourself to go where you want to go is annoying. Yeah, it's a really annoying game. Again, it's cool to see more PS1 games on here, but it'd be nice to see some actual hidden gems rear their end, rather than this tripe. One of the main reasons I was excited for this kart was for Street Racer. I already own it on other platforms, but it would finally give me a chance to put my Street Racer knowledge to good use without having to make a Street Racer specific video that no one wants to watch. Instead, I'm making an Evercade Piko Collection 4 video that no one wants to watch. Street Racer was Ubisoft's attempt to capitalise on the success of Super Mario Kart. Obviously loads of games have done that since, but what made Street Racer so unique is that there were so many different versions of it. The same game was released for the Super Nintendo, the Mega Drive, the Sega Saturn, the Sony PlayStation, but it certainly didn't feel like the same game. The Mega Drive, for instance, played like a standard racer, where Super Nintendo offering used the Mode 7 capability, giving it that Super Mario Kart feel, where the world moves around you. The Sega Saturn famously had an 8-player split screen option. Back then TVs were a lot smaller than they are now, so I'm sure you can imagine how horrible that was. Luckily, if you were foolish enough to buy a Sega Saturn, you likely had no friends, let alone 7, so I'm pretty certain no one has ever tried it. History lesson over, and back to the game. Worse than you remember it being is a good way to describe Street Racer. The fact that it made my number 3, it did actually make number 1. I must have put number 3 when I initially wrote this, and then moved up to number 1 because everything else was so rubbish. Anyway, the fact that it made number 1 gives you a good indicator of the quality of this collection. This game has 3 modes: Racing, Rumble and Soccer. Rumble and Soccer are more or less unplayable. In Rumble you drive around bashing into each other for seemingly hours, hoping that your opponent will give up and just drive off the end, once you've bumped into the sides enough to make them eligible for him to do so. Soccer is basically like playing Where's Wally with a football. I'm not calling it Where's Waldo, I already called it soccer. If you do manage to find the ball and pick it up, then you'll watch as endless characters just goalie hang and claim your shot as their own. Racing, on the other hand, isn't so bad. It's no Super Mario Kart, and it's probably a bit too fast. Still, the unique abilities for each character make it fun, especially in Championship mode. I'm not giving this Gem of the Week, but I do love me some Street Racer for some reason. The Piko Collection 4 has a nice bit of variety and a lot of interesting games, but there's just no quality to it whatsoever. As much as I love Street Racer, and as much as I loved it as a kid, even I can admit that it's not a particularly good game. Yet, it's the best this collection had to offer. This is definitely one of the worst collections I've played on the Evercade, with its only saving grace being that nothing's terrible, just nothing's good. Everything's around the same level of quality, and for those reasons, I'm going to score this one a below average 4 out of 10. As always, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more of my content and to help support my channel, and hopefully I'll catch you next time.